Hello, and welcome to Law Talk. My name is John Celebrezze, and I'm the co-founder of the Celebrezze-Zangi Community Legal Education Project, as we call it, CZ-CLEP for short. Our organization provides continuing education about the judiciary and legislature to attorneys, judges, government officials, and the general public. As a career educator, I recognize early on how important legal matters are and how they impact our lives. I am the nephew of the late Anthony J. Celebrezze, who was the popular 5-term mayor of Cleveland and a member of President Kennedy's cabinets. As a tribute to his lifetime commitment to the legal process, we dedicate this show. Our guest today is Christopher Aupperle. Chris received his Juris Doctorate from the University of Akron. He is a graduate of the Ohio State University with a bachelor's degree in production and operation management. Chris was admitted to practice law in Ohio in 2005. He is employed with the law offices of David McCarter in Medina, practicing primarily in the areas of domestic relations and criminal defense. Chris and his wife Shannon reside in Medina with their 2 sons. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. Chris, I'm reaching for my trusty clipboard as I do often on the shows. Generally, before we have a guest come, I try to put a few questions together. I understand that you had a rather interesting journey to becoming an attorney, and you didn't exactly follow the traditional path. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, absolutely. I didn't have I guess would be a traditional path. Some people decide they're going to be an attorney right away, and they go through undergrad and pick a traditional communications or political science background.
Sure, sure.
And I went to Ohio State and I started out in engineering, and about midway through I decided to switch my majors to business and finish up in production operations management. And I always thought I would be in some sort of business, moving up through some sort of management rank. And
sure.
Immediately after school I actually went down to Florida and worked for the Walt Disney World Company for about 7 years.
So you literally went to Disney World.
I did. I went to Disney World. I did. And I actually was a manager there for about 7 years.
Wow.
Working at the Magic Kingdom in a couple of different, what they would call roles down there.
So you literally lived in Orlando for a period of several years?
I did. I didn't live in a castle, but we had a place down there and lived down at Disney. My good friend and partner now, David McCarter, who I work for, asked me to come back and go to law school, and there are a lot of circumstances that came up that I made the decision to make the move. My family's back here in Ohio.
Oh, sure.
My wife's family's in Dayton, and after our first son, we decided to go ahead and make the move, and I went to the University of Akron and started school. I was one of the older students in class, and here I am 8 years later now as a practicing attorney.
Well, let's shift gears. We're
Sure.
going to talk about the law a little bit here, obviously. You are obviously a practicing attorney. After you got out of law school, you've only been practicing about 5 years now. What was the biggest challenge you faced? I mean, from a younger attorney's perspective.
Well, for me, I think it's for a lot of people in society, but for me it was always doing public speaking. And forever, all growing up, I was deathly afraid of public speaking. So the thought of actually being an attorney when I was younger and going to school, I just couldn't see it. I didn't feel comfortable getting in front of people. And for me, as I look back, I think it's been an amazing kind of a transformation as I routinely go into courtroom where you have a lot of other attorneys in front of a judge.
Oh yeah,
in front
I've
of a
seen you on plenty of occasions. Yeah,
and you just get up and you start speaking and having a conversation, and I think that's one of the things I learned. You're just really having a conversation with whoever you're talking with, even if it's in front of a large group of people. And same thing with the jury. You're having a conversation sometimes with the jury, sometimes just with your client or the witness that's on a stand.
That's interesting, though.
But that was difficult, difficult initially for me to overcome.
I see. Well, as I said, I oftentimes will wind up on the same day on sometimes Thursday mornings, and at least in Judge Kimbler's court, and I've seen you there doing your thing with no problem, and but that's a perspective that I've actually always wanted to ask a younger attorney that question. It was a good question along those lines. Many of our guests, have been practicing for a long time. Some of them are judges and whatnot, and being a senior citizen myself, you could somewhat forget how you felt about things way back then.
Well, I think, excuse me to interrupt,
sure,
but I think one of the other things that I think as a young attorney that I've seen, I've been practicing now for about 4.5 years. And the first couple years, every time you go into a courtroom or into a situation, I always felt pretty nerve-wracked because you just never know what to expect. Are you going to be going to a hearing? Are you asking the right questions?
Sure.
Do you know enough of the law? Do you know enough about the case? It took probably 3.5 years before I felt comfortable, and now I feel completely comfortable
Sure.
going into the courtroom. But they call it, I guess, getting your sea legs and getting
Sure.
into court.
Sure.
That was difficult as well. Just feeling comfortable as you moved in.
Well, I really appreciate the comments because we utilize, CZ is an educational endeavor, and I oftentimes share the shows with, I'm an adjunct professor at Kent State University, and I'll oftentimes share the show with my colleagues and whatnot. And I think for younger people coming up thinking that, I'm interested in being an attorney, you're an excellent role model for them, and some of us older folks sort of forgot about that part of it. But
well, thank you.
So I mean, that's great, and yes, in the legal profession, for the benefit of everybody, you have to stand and deliver. I mean, you really do. I mean, as an advocate of your client. Okay, we'll shift again here, and we'll talk a little bit about your practice. What are the areas of law that you do primarily practice in, and maybe tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Our practice primarily practices in domestic relations law, and that's primarily what we do. And in domestic relations, which is it's divorce,
Sure.
dissolution, child support cases. It's two unmarried parents that are looking for parental rights and responsibilities. Who's going to have custody of the child? Who's going to have parenting time? We do some adoptions. Someone's not paying their support. We'll help either defend or help prosecute, trying to get someone to pay their support.
Sure.
That would be a lot of what we do on the domestic relations side. We also, I also do a lot of, criminal defense.
Yeah.
Whether it's just misdemeanors, we have to do some felony defense work here in Medina County as well. And I'd say the majority of the criminal defense work is DUI law, or driving under the influence law.
Oh, I see. Well, that's pretty interesting. Let's go there now, because we did have the opportunity to have Judge McElvain as our guest some months ago, and we visited this very area from a judge's perspective, so it'd be interesting to talk to you from an attorney's perspective. You mentioned defending clients in DUI cases. People may think that there is not much to defending someone who is charged with a DUI, but actually, as we learned in the last show, the law is quite complex. How so?
Well, when a client comes to us in terms of if they've initially been charged with a DUI, there's just a tremendous amount to go over with them in terms of finding out some information from them.
Sure.
And explain to them some of the penalties that they face and a lot of issues that they're dealing with. First of all, they probably don't have their license anymore.
Yeah, right.
That's typical that they don't have their license for some reason or not. And the first question is, how do I get it back?